What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on CannaBuzz, and if you're joining us on YouTube or the podcastosphere, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. We're going to be talking all about hash. We've got Mushmouth. I'm gonna mess this up because this is a little bit of a mouthful. We've got Mushmouth from Mushmelts. That's what I meant to say. Sorry about that. But we've got Mushmouth here. We're gonna be talking about what's going on in the world of hash rosin, what's going on with freeze dried and bubble, and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to nerd out about hash, we're gonna be getting into it. But before we get too far into the episode, I have to give some shout outs. First off, shout out to everyone in the CannaBuzz community. They are the people that support this channel every single month in our members only community. It's at cannabuzz.app in your browser, or if you're on iOS, you can download the iOS app by searching CannaBuzz in the App Store. We'd love to see you over there. You can join us for as little as $4.20 a month, but you can use that code BUZZ for your first month free. And we really appreciate your support. We hope to see you over there. And shout out to Devilsleaf44. He shows up to like every live stream, including this one today that we're doing live right now to the CannaBuzz community. So thanks everyone over there. Also, shout out to lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you want to use some organic IPM spray in your grow, you can use it indoor or outdoor to just knock down all sorts of bugs and pathogens that are trying to attack your plant. And you can check out our episodes with them on our channel. Check out Lost Coast Plant Therapy. You can find it on Amazon or in your grow store or at their website. We really appreciate their support. And then last shout out from me goes to sacred3mushrooms.com. If you want to grab grow your own mushrooms at home, you can grab a grow kit. It's about this big. It's like about as big as a shoebox, or a little bit bigger than that. And you can grow multiple flushes or multiple harvests at home with this really great grow kit over at sacred3mushrooms.com and use the code CannaBuzz for a discount. And then I'll throw it over to JR.
Thanks, Q. This week for the Tiki announcements, he dropped the Demon Hunter, which is Dante's Inferno by Headhunter, which are two of his bangers. These are going to be reg seeds. So this is an opportunity for you to get some males in there if that's what you're looking for this season, maybe something to breed with in the summertime. And then we want to talk about what Raw Genetics also has to offer. They've got some big stuff going on. They've recently teamed up with the Backpack Boys, and they're doing some collaborations. They've got a license to do cuts there in the state of California. So they have a nursery license there, so they'll be able to offer some of this stuff. But they did a drop. It's Candy Truffle, which is the lemon cherry gelato by Black Cherry Gelato. So there's a lot of gelato in there. So check out rawgenetics.io and support the team. I mean, Brad really has been a huge supporter for me and my family and for the show for a long time. So shout out to Raw Genetics, and also shout out to Tiki at tikiseeds.com, who is also doing a free pack when you order.
Nice. Well, we have Mushmouth on the show from Mushmelts. We talked to Mushmouth about, I can't remember how long ago that was, maybe about a year ago or so. We had him on the show, so we're bringing him back on. We're going to be talking all about hash in the show. Our official intro is that today we are very fortunate to have Mushmouth from Mushmelts. He's here to talk about the current state of rosin and competing in competitions on a local and regional level. Welcome to the show, Mushmouth.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks, man. Welcome.
Thanks, buddy.
So tell us, man, what's going on? What's new in the hash rosin world? JR tries to keep, our ear to the ground, so we'd love to just kind of catch up with you and what's going on.
I mean, it's the same thing, really. Honestly, everyone's just pushing harder and harder, trying to find more unique terps and what really stands out and all that. But it's pretty much the same thing it has been. Everyone's just doing their thing, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. So everyone has what they feel is the best method. So
right,
it depends. But a lot of people are hunting seeds. That's a big push right now. Is everyone's tired of running the same genetics. So it's nice to see more people popping more seeds everywhere.
Nice. All right. So what does the market seem to be responding to right now?
A lot of fruit. Gas is starting to get a little bit more popular than it was the past couple of years. We're starting to see it placed better in comps. We're seeing more washers wash it, more growers grow it. But still pretty much dominated by a lot of that fruit candy terps. I'm seeing lime being really popular. A lot of people are talking about anything with a good lime to it. Um, but yeah, essentially everyone's just looking for something different as everyone's starting to get tired of everyone running the same shit.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I mean, I think bringing in some diversity will unbottleneck a lot of stuff. And I know some of the older breeders are trying to bring back some of the older seed stock that they have and bring that kind of forward. Are you finding here in the Oregon area that more people are willing to take chances on newer stuff that maybe isn't what the market is hammering for?
Um, I mean, it depends on the person. Some people just like running the same stuff that know it's consistent. I think it's more farmer to farmer than necessarily a regional thing. But there's definitely certain people pushing for more old school genetics to come back. Like I was saying, sour is starting to be really popular again. Lime's really popular. Oranges are getting really popular again. Um, but yeah, everyone's just looking.
Nice. So, as we kind of kick off the episode here, um, we like to kind of like catch everyone up or get everyone to the same level. So, as we kind of start the discussion, could you kind of help us break down what's resin, what's rosin, and what's hash, just so folks kind of understand the difference between those three things?
Typically, when you're talking about like resin or essentially like live resin, that's usually a hydrocarbon extraction. Some people also refer to obviously the glands on the plant as resin glands. So there is a little confusion on there. Rosin is a solventless process with heat and pressure. Just like hash itself is usually made with the dry sift method or a water extraction method to make hash. And that really defines more so on what kind of hash it is and all that kind of stuff. Versus resin typically is more referred to in the BHO scene.
Excellent. So now I want to kind of get into a little bit of processing. If people want to understand, how you get down, they could watch the last episode we had with you, where you kind of walk people through your process. But something I kind of want to lock down for people because a lot of our listeners are into making bubble, but they don't have access to a freeze dryer, and so that post processing is really important. Can you kind of talk through that process for folks that maybe don't have a freeze dryer?
Yeah, there's typically a microplaning or sieving where you take like a flour sift and push the resin through with a spoon. You got to be real particular about the moisture content and how cold your room is. Depending on if it's fresh frozen, it's gonna be really hard to get through all this without the room being super cold. Dry cured stuff's gonna be a lot easier to process in that sense. But that's why a lot of people, when it's really greasy, will do microplane because you can freeze the puck of hash and work on small amounts at a time. Compared to sieving, people usually wick the pucks for a couple hours in their cold room while they're washing, and then when it's the texture and the moisture content they want, they'll push it through the screen, which will vary on the strain and how greasy versus sandy it is.
Okay, so I'm homeboy. I'm at home. I just got my nice big pile of blobber of wet 90. What would you recommend I instantly do to start drying that and getting it ready?
I would say feel the texture of it because, like I said, depending on how greasy it is or how sandy it is going to dictate how easy it's going to be to process. So if it's super greasy and you don't have a cold room, you might be better off freezing it and then microplaning it or sieving it because if it's too greasy and your room's too warm, it's just going to mush and just spread all over the sieve and not go through. So like the first thing is dictating how greasy is your hash. You'll probably even notice that as you're scooping it out of your bags. Typically, fresh frozen is going to be super greasy and hard to deal with without a cold room. So a lot of at-home people are all usually doing dry trim, which is a lot sandier of a hash, a lot easier to deal with. That'll be a lot easier to process through the sift without having to have a colder environment.
And so now for the folks that do have a freeze dryer, I'm hearing that people are doing a static pull to kind of clean things up with their post process.
Yeah, so with freeze drying, if done right, you can get the hash to come out looking like straight up Keith because you've kept it all intact. You haven't smushed any heads through the microplane or through the sift and made it to where it's a congealed little ball. It's still in its intact head form. But once again, you have to have a cold room to do this process. Once again, if your hash is super greasy, any temperature warm up is going to make it grease and puddle up. So these people doing this are doing it most likely in a room under 30 degrees, and then they're doing pretty much what you do in a dry sift situation. As soon as you get all the water out of there, it's pretty much dry sift, and it'll stay in that dry sift kind of state and texture as long as it's cold.
That's wild. That's kind of like trying to get that to like that, what we are calling a 6-star, kind of status. And can you kind of maybe break down for people that, level of kind of what makes something a 6-star hash?
In my opinion, what makes something a 6-star hash is how well it melts. My best judge on that is how well it rosins. Anything that I feel is true 6-star rosins over 90%. That's a good dictation of how pure it is. If it wasn't pure enough to get pressed through the bag, it's not very pure. So you're going to see that on the nail. You're going to see it when you smoke it in any sort of hash form compared to the ones that have 90+% rates.
Man, I was listening to you talk about just how it requires a cold room, how cold it is, and I was just thinking about the level of like infrastructure basically required to do something like this. And we've interviewed some other guests on the show, and we've seen, people kind of like working inside of like freezers basically. I know this is kind of off script, but I was just curious, like to get to this level, I imagine there's like a big delta of between like the level of investment between like one level to the next, because you just have to buy so much equipment to get you to be able to have these various conditions. Is that right?
100%. Definitely. And like there's levels to it. Most at-home people aren't really going to see too much 6-star. It's really hard to get that quality, especially if you're doing dry trim. I don't think dry material is ever going to really make something that's that greasy and that hard to deal with. That being said, if you are going that route, you are getting those kind of qualities. It does take more effort. It does take more equipment, and that tends to be why those products go for a higher price, because it's not easy to achieve without the proper equipment.
Kind of speaking on that note, it kind of leads us into the next question, which is about dry sift. What do you see the biggest barriers are that keep dry sift from becoming mainstream consumption?
A lot of the time it has more dust content to it, because I feel like with the water hash you can rinse a lot of like small contaminants out that will rinse past the screens and whatnot. That and it just doesn't taste quite the same. Like, it's not bad, but it's like the people who are wanting that, rosin, there's a certain flavor that fresh frozen bubble hash has to it, and that's where more of the big demand of the market is. Not saying that there aren't people that don't mind that cured hash kind of flavor, old school flavor, but predominantly most of the market is hooked on the fresh frozen taste.
Well, I noticed when we went to Emerald Cup this year that there were offerings like Temple Balls and other forms of hash. Do you see that kind of coming online?
I mean, there's definitely there and there's markets for it, but it's not the driving force of the hash scene, in my opinion. A lot of the hash scene where people are putting all this time in, they're trying to get that true 6-star. They're trying to push the limits of the quality they can. Compared to a lot of the stuff that's like the lower end, you're just running dry trim from a farm, where you're running stuff that's not necessarily putting out the highest quality you can. And that market's definitely there, because obviously everyone, there's a price point for everyone. Not everyone wants to spend top dollar for these products. So it's definitely there. It's just almost easier to wash. It's easier to have it clean. It's easier to do a lot of the processing in a water environment. Even the dry material washed and pressed tastes better than dry sift, in my opinion. I haven't really had much dry sift rosin. I thought it tastes like half rosin. You know what I mean? And it's I'm not sure exactly if it's just a certain amount of the plant matter dust getting in there, and whatnot, and getting it kind of a greener taste to it. It also tends to come out drier and chalkier of the rosin. Most people want a wet, nice, moist looking rosin.
So just even from a consumption standpoint, it's completely different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's usually drier and it's not quite as good as it could be. I feel dry sift's more meant for making bricks and temple balls. I don't know that dry sift's the greatest for rosin. And once again, the driving force in the hashing, in my opinion, is rosin. And that's why the fresh frozen tends to dominate.
And so now I hear, sorry, Q, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna take you off course a little bit, but I don't know if you want. I can take my question after yours.
So I hear some people say that certain cultivars are better as live resin than they are rosin. Do you ever hold any truth to that?
Oh, 100%. Anything that's hazy or has too much terpenoline or limonene tends to not wash very well, but then you'll get crazy good yields in a hydrocarbon extraction. So that's definitely a thing. What some people theorize is the way the terps react with the water, it kind of explodes the heads. It makes it hard to really catch it. That or the wax membrane, the cuticle membrane around the head is so thin and so fragile with such harsh terps already that they pretty much just explode in the wash, and it's almost impossible to really collect them properly.
So I was thinking about the question earlier about like what's kind of holding back people getting into these finer forms of hash and thing concentrates, and I was just thinking on the consumer side about the barrier to entry in terms of how to consume this stuff. So right, like if a resin pen or whatever it is, like stuff in a quick vape pen, wherein do you get into these other forms, it's not as consumable. I was curious what your thoughts are on the consumers that are buying this stuff at the dispensary. Are they using like Puffcos or something like that? What do you think a lot of the folks are
I
often
mean, I
using?
definitely Puffcos have definitely become super popular. They're so easy. I know a lot of people still use quartz. I prefer quartz. I use a Puffco when I'm out and about, so it's easy
Yeah.
to travel. But then, honestly, the pin market is the biggest market when it comes to concentrates because it's so easy. Most
Right.
people go to the dispensary and trying to get that cheap, easy thing, and like the pin really, makes it easy. You can make 100% rosin into a pin just from a heat process. So it's a really easy way to get people into it and whatnot.
Yeah, totally.
Do you,
Go ahead, JR. We're both
we're
freelancing right now.
stepping today, right? But do you think that sometimes these vape cartridges kind of skew the flavor and taste desires of the consumer?
I mean, I personally don't think they taste good. I won't make them with my company. I don't believe in them personally. I'm just saying statistically, when you look at what the people spend at a dispensary
Right.
market wise, majority of the concentrate market sales is in pins.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I go to the dispensary about once a week to get like vape pens just because I need a quick way to smoke, and I've got like a little kid, and so it's just easier to do like a vape pen without smelling like weed or
Yeah.
whatever. But and when I go to the dispensary, like we're down the street from one of those Amazon delivery hubs, and so I just see tons of like people going through there and buying vape pens primarily or pre-rolls. I've noticed a lot too. And so I'm just kind of thinking about how do we get those consumers to consume these kind of finer forms. But before I take us too far off in a different direction, we're going to talk about competition. So been talking about competition, JR and I, in the past. We talked about Emerald Cup. We've been talking about the Dude Grows Cup recently. And so we'd love to get in touch with you, or sorry, kind of explore the topic with you. So let's kick things off with JR tells me that you've been a judge at quite a few competitions. When you are a judge at one of these concentrate competitions, what are you looking for in the hash?
Big thing I'm looking for is, like texture, color, the nose. Make sure it's clean. You don't want to like open up the jar and there be a bunch of particulate in it. Just signs that show that it wasn't handled well before it got to the competition. And then when I go and smoke it, I want to see that flavor transfer over. Some stuff it smells great in the jar, but then you hit it and there's not much flavor to it. So like how well that carries over, how well it lingers, how smooth it is. All those little aspects add up to what makes it the better hash.
Now, in many cases, we find these cultivars that hit your nose and are just crazy. But then, like you said, you go to taste it and it just doesn't taste, it doesn't taste like it smells. Um, are you always selecting for flavor?
100%. I definitely want a good flavor to it. I want something that you hit it and it lingers through. If you want something to stand out, these like unless you're trying to just do the flashy like, oh, look at this and hope for that sale to be long and lingering. I feel like those first round sell great, and then after the second round, you're like, yeah, it just didn't quite follow through, so I'm not going to get it this round, kind of a situation. So same thing with flour. I feel that same stuff happens. It looks great, smells great first round, but then after you smoke it a few times, you're like, yeah, it just doesn't quite do what I want or expect.
So, do you find certain flavor profiles lean towards having better taste in the mouth?
Sometimes some I would say are easier to have a good taste in the mouth. I also think like just growing method and how clean the processing of the hash is. It's like some people just have dirty wash vessels and dirty bags, and some people just aren't washing as clean a material. Some people are washing, who knows what. Sometimes some people spray their stuff with stuff in flour. And, sometimes weird flavors come out. I've had stuff that smelled and tastes kind of like sulfur. I've had a few that kind of smell like pool cleaner, that hydrochloric acid or hydrochlorous acid or whatever the fuck it is. There's a lot of talks about it with a lot of people lately. People are smelling it in flour. People are smelling it in the hash jars. I definitely have experienced it, and it's kind of like off-putting.
So, I see homeboys are now whipping out the cameras or whipping out the phones with the super micro zoom, and so they're really getting down on how clean the hash is in these competitions.
Yes, definitely.
So I was gonna ask you a question about, well, Jr. put this question because he's fascinated on, I think, on the logistics side of things. So, him and I have both been to flower competitions, right? Where there's like 50 entries, and there's you can kind of judge those. You maybe not smoke all 50 of them or something like that, but you can get through a lot of them even just in a couple hours if you're just doing a couple hits here and there of flower. But it's a little bit of a different story when you're doing dabs, because it doesn't take too many dabs of a strain to not only taste it but also get pretty ripped. So how do you logistically handle kind of judging a dab competition, basically?
Yeah, so before ego class, those are the ones where I take most dabs. It's usually like around 40 to like 45-ish dabs. I will for the 2 to 3 weeks beforehand, I'll just start increasing my intake consumption, because I'm going to end up smoking like 4 grams or so in like a 4-hour period. So I just got to get my tolerance up is one of the bigger things to be able to handle it. And then just the practice of the motion of like trying to do it fast. So I'll sit down and I'll take a gram and I'll split it up into 10 dabs, and then I'll try to just get through those 10 as fast as I can, because the jars just keep coming. You got to keep up as everyone else is going fast. First year is a little more intense than I expected. The second year I did this prep and I was one of the first ones done, and it was a lot easier to handle. A lot of time you're not going for exactly the high. Some stuff has a creeper high, some stuff
Right.
hits you instantly. So it's hard to really judge things just on high low. And I feel like a lot of cups are judged mainly on smell, looks, flavor, smoothness. And if those aren't there, then they're not going to win in the first place, regardless of how the high is.
Yeah.
Do
So
you
I feel
do you sometimes find though that you'll hit one and it'll just punch you through?
definitely, but how I know it's not the one from a couple times ago is I've had
Where
strains myself that take 30 minutes to hit. You know what I mean? So it's hard to say, and it's hard to like. The few of the cuts I've been to, they don't even judge the high. They mean like I just did the
Yeah.
dab ride a couple weeks ago. Really like the way they did theirs. There was less competitors, and they cleaned your rig every hit. So it was a super clean smoke experience compared to something like Ego, where it's like, if I don't bring something to change my water or do this, it's not taken care of. At the dab right, it was like they literally had some people just walking around grabbing rigs, going, cleaning them, bringing them back to you. It was really sweet, really efficient. It was also only 13 or 14 dabs I think I had to take, so it wasn't anywhere near like the Ego class where you got to do 40 in like 4 or 5 hours.
So talk a little more about competing yourself. I understand that you've been doing some competitions yourself.
Yeah, we entered the Dab Right a couple of weeks ago. We got second place with our rainbow belts from our full term run last year. So that was pretty cool. And then other than that, we just did Ego Clash last winter, and the Ego Clash was before that. We don't do too many cups, but we're trying to get into more of them.
So with the dab right, is it like a state thing, then regional, or how does that work?
So they're doing regionals, and then if you get in the top three, you get invited to the nationals. So in November, we got to go down to LA and compete in the nationals. So we have the next 8 months or whatever it is to figure out what we're trying to enter into for the nationals,
So
which we'll
that's
be
not
competing against everyone from the regionals, which I think sounds really cool.
that's not stressful at all.
No, it's not too bad.
So
Should
what do
be
you got?
fun.
I mean, can you kind of give us any little sneak peeks of what you might have in mind for the comp?
I'm honestly not sure. We just popped a bunch of seeds, and we got more we're going to be popping. We ran some seeds for some breeders. They were really happy with the work we did, so they sent us a bunch more seeds. So we're popping some more stuff. So that's always fun. We were working. We got stuff from Pure Melt and then stuff from Ronin Connect are the main two.
Excellent. And so now, one of the thing dealing with this kind of regional and state stuff is, especially in our state here, things can be kind of clicky. And you have a brand, Mushmelts, and so how do you kind of navigate that as you're trying to get your brand out there?
Yeah, I mean it's hard. I get some of the clickiness is you gotta like try to get yourself into a spot and work with the right reps that value your product where your product should be valued. And then some people just don't like people, and that creates clicks. I don't really go one way or the other. I kind of just stay neutral and don't get mixed in the drama. I just don't screw people over. I just don't talk behind people's back about little things. Most people tend to let me and my business partner go where we want because no one dislikes us because we don't do wrong to anybody. So I feel like a lot of the clickiness is either because people are trying to act better than other people or because certain people have done other people wrong, so they just exclude certain people.
Right. Well, I guess you were given some pro tips earlier on being a judge for ash competitions, but would love to hear some pro tips on the other side of things. Do you have any tips for folks that might be preparing for a competition as on the hash making side? Do you have any suggestions on things that they could do that will set them up for success?
Yeah, a lot of these cups are judged by your peers. So do research on who your peers are. A lot of times they'll post who's going to be competing, or you can see who's doing it. Just like see what they like. You know what I mean? It's like we entered Rainbow Belts not because I'm a Z fan. I just know everyone else loves Z. You know what I mean? So instead of it's not always about what you like. Sometimes it's about what the others like and stuff like that. And obviously, it still has to be quality. And it's hard because everyone's starting to get tired of certain things. So things are definitely kind of changing up. Z terps tend to always be just a good bet. Most people just really love Z. Papaya terps are another popular one you'll see in cuts a lot. But things are starting to change. I'm starting to see more different stuff like gas start placing cups a little bit and stuff that has more unique terps and not just a straight Z or straight papaya starting to place. So just have something unique that definitely stands out. Be hard judgmental on yourself. You're gonna bring something to a cup. You want to bring your A game. You're not gonna want to bring something and be like, second thoughts about it because you know what I mean. That's already telling you right there. It's like questionable.
Right. That makes sense. Um, Cool. One last question on this kind of part on the Ash community. So I'm a community guy. I'm a community nerd. Are there any like forums or like resource or communities that you keep track of, or you suggest people kind of tap into as a way to kind of, I guess, join this community, so to speak, or to just kind of be in touch with other people that are doing this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I'm honestly not really on any forums. I know they're out there. I'd say try to find people that you like their product or like what they're doing and they're open about it, and try to find people that like, post stuff and just follow them and, learn from, snippets that they put out there. There's a lot of hash makers that'll put out like just little tidbits randomly every now and then. If you're open, absorbent to it, and you try some of this stuff, it's a good way to check in on, some tech and whatnot that not everyone's always talking about constantly.
Nice. I was while you were talking, I just looked up. I think there's some if people are on Reddit, it looks like there's some communities for this sort of stuff on Reddit. I just found our bubble hash. So if people want to
Yeah.
find all kinds of stuff, they could find that on Reddit. I found that it's good for these sorts of things, sub communities. Well, cool. Let's talk about cultivation. So a lot of our fans, or sorry, our fans, our viewers of the show, our growers. So they will love that we're going to dive into more on the growing side of things here. So we hear that you've been doing some consulting. Can you tell us about kind of what you've been up to on that side of things?
Yeah, so there's a rec farm that I've been friends with for a while. They hit me and my business partner up to come and do some consulting for us. They already have a decent name brand with hash on the market. They're just trying to elevate their process because they really like the work that we do. It's BA Botanicals in Oregon. They're definitely good people, and we're just over there trying to help steer them in the right direction to help, once again, just elevate their game and just get a better product, better yields, that kind of stuff.
So often in these situations, you have a formula for success and you can really lead them in the right direction, but you get resistance from a financial aspect of it. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so they have no investors, so it's just him that does it all. So they definitely have some price limitations because not everything I do is the cheapest. So we're working through with what we have now. They definitely already run organic kind of stuff, which is different than what I was running. So we're transitioning as the crops come in, and we're doing testers and just increasing their production and quality just overall in that general sense while we try to transition more to our kind of methods while we work through their stock they already have.
Awesome. I was just looking through, and we had a question in chat that was from earlier, but it's going to derail us for a second. But I think we can knock it out real quick. Do you have any pro tips? This is from Devilsley 44. Do you have any pro tips for cleaning bubble bags?
Good one.
Alkanox is a good one. It's a powder detergent that rinses clean. You can soak it with just some water and that. It has the dilution rates on the little package. It's just a little like powder that you mix in with it, and then it just rinses nice and clean.
Nice. Awesome.
Say the name of that again.
Alkanox.
Alkanox. Okay. Pro tip, because that's something that's always a hassle. What about like those Dr. Bronner's peppermint hemp soaps and stuff like that?
They don't quite rinse as clean. They leave more residual. They can rinse clean, but they also don't break it down as good. Like the Alkanox breaks it down pretty much as good as like isopropyl would. Not as fast, obviously, but it also rinses clean and is easier on the bags than isopropyl or ethanol would be.
Nice. That's
Awesome.
good.
Great question from the chat.
Yeah, that is great. So kind of getting back to the cultivation opportunity, is this going to be like living soil beds? Is it like a turn and burn? How's that going to go down?
So their indoor is turn and burn on their dirt at the moment. Their greenhouse is mostly in beds already. Since it's a turnkey operation, they've been operating for I think 5 or 7 years at this point. We're just trying to steer their production into better quality overall and little things like that, and more do our living soil feeds and other things like that to get their stuff on more our part and whatnot.
Yeah, we have I'm excited about this next question because I've been thinking about this too. When do you start preparing for the outdoor grow season? You're like, I've been doing this for the last, we're recording in March. Have you already been preparing, or are you kind of now starting to? Kind of curious, when do you get started and what sort of things are you doing to prepare for the outdoor grow season?
So yeah, it depends. If you're doing straight full term outdoors with no supplemental light, now is almost still a little early to take cuts. You can if you have indoor space, but you can't really get plants fully outside in the Willamette Valley until May 20th or so. Anything earlier than that, you risk them flowering. Some stuff, even May 20th, might flower depending on how indica dominant it is in a situation.
Yeah.
What are you doing for like soil preps and that kind of
Soil prep.
stuff?
At the rec farm I'm working at, we're getting soil testing, what's with it, and then we're gonna devise a top dress to mix in and start getting teas going to get the soil life growing. Since it's in a greenhouse, so the soil's dry. On my full terms, I'm still getting a lot of rain, and my holes are just flooded, so I can't really do too much prep on where I'm at. As I'm just straight in the ground.
Yeah.
That's more so. I gotta wait till it starts drying back before I could really mix stuff in there. But once it does start drying out here in the next few weeks to a month, get my amendments mixed in so they break down faster. I do, like hot dirt mixed soil, like super soil, like Subcool would do for most of my stuff. But I just got to have it to be dry enough. If I put it in there too wet, it's just going to rinse out, and it's not going to do and cook how it needs.
Sure.
So are you like in the earth or are you in pots?
In my spot, we're just straight in the ground with some soil. At the rec farm, we got beds and pots.
So are you like kind of digging a hole and then supplementing with your super soil mix and then planting into the earth?
Yeah, that's what it is. We dug holes out, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and then we've been re-amending every year.
Nice.
Oh, so you're re-amending that soil that you put in your hole from.
Yeah. I'm just adding
Nice.
more. I'm just adding more stuff to it, and then I'm just gonna till it in.
Right.
What kind of stuff?
Insect frass, alfalfa meal, bone meal,
Shout out
soybean meal, bunch of good stuff, compost, worm castings.
Shout out to Frass Valley. Good worm Frass, good guy. Hit him up. He's definitely a member of the community.
Yeah, for
Uh,
those amendments, do you have a recommended company that you tend to like at home or I guess at the rec
Um,
side?
Well, yeah, in Oregon, in Portland, there's this place called Concentrates Northwest. They have a lot of good, just dry amendments.
Oh, cool.
I just go up there. They got good prices. They're good people. They've been using that same place at the rec farm I'm working at, so they already have a business account there. So we're just going to continue there. We're just going to switch more to my top dress and feed regimen and get teas going, and just a couple of other things to really, up their living soil game.
And so for
that's
those, sorry, JR, for that, the rec grow earlier, you were talking about how you're in beds and in pots that are dry, and you were gonna like re-amend them and use microbe teas, I think, to kind of get them going. Can you just real quick? Can you talk about how early are you doing that before you start growing in it? I'm just kind of curious how long you kind of give it, I guess, to like re-inoculate it and kind of come back to life.
So we have some light depths we're gonna plant in the next about 2 to 3 weeks. We're doing teas this week on it. Obviously, sooner the better. I just started here. We're gonna get a lot of other stuff in order and whatnot, and we're pretty short staffed. But the dirt just being dry, it's gonna take a second because it's so hydrophobic to really absorb moisture proper. So we just got to get in there and get it, alive before we plant, so we don't have to deal with that while the plants are in it trying to root. So we're just trying to get ahead of the game on that. Sooner the better, obviously. Obviously, you don't want to do it months ahead of time. If you're not going to put anything in there for a while, it's not too crazy important. But since we're planting soon, we're going to focus on those beds and those pots, and then do the rest of the greenhouse. It's a pretty big greenhouse with a lot of beds and pots to it, and then we're going to work on those more so when we get ready for the full terms and stuff like that.
nice. Sorry, I was spacing out there for a minute. One of the things that folks are having issues with now is aeration. When they're building soils, we've kind of found that rice holes can be problematic. And so, what kind of stuff are you recommending people use for aeration when they're building soils right now?
I tend to use a lot of pumice. It's heavy, but it's better than perlite. In a sense, it's cheap as can be, and it does the same kind of porosity content that perlite does, but it holds nutrients better than perlite and stuff like that. It's just kind of heavy in a sense, but I'm a big fan of pumice.
Yeah. I like it as well. Soil King uses it, I think, in his mixes, and it's held up well for me over the years.
Yeah.
Um, so you were earlier we were talking all about different flavors and all sorts of things on the strain side of things. So, which strains or cultivars are you looking at running this year?
That's a hard one. I don't know. At our spot, we're probably going to run our ones we know do good outside because some things are hit or miss. And then I'm at the foothills of Mount Hood with no greenhouse over my stuff, so I got to make sure it's done fairly early. So we've just been doing several years here. So probably run like the lava cake, the rainbow belts, gas hound. Most of our stuff that's done early October kind of a situation, just for that kind of a sense. That's my biggest battle where I'm at is I got to get it down before the rains come.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of was leading us into the next question is, there's a lot of people who struggle with that and they want to try to pull off to get some decent medicine by the end of the year. Are there cultivars or breeders that you know of who kind of cater to that?
I'm not sure, honestly. It's like a lot of stuff we do. We start it inside and then test it, for flower time to begin with, just to know if it's a easy, quicker flower. Everyone is typically breeding for faster flowering in general. Period. Most people don't necessarily breed outside, so it's not necessarily most breeders have the knowledge of when their plants trigger. Just because it's an 8 to 9 week strain, if it triggers later than something else, it's still going to take longer to finish. So it's more so on like the light hours it triggers, more so sometimes than the how fast it actually flowers. But it's hard to say honestly. Because also some years are just different. Also, if you how you're feeding, with it being a short amount of time of your light changing day by day, if you're feeding too much nitrogen, or you can just have a longer veg period, just like your watering techniques. If you're watering super heavy when they're trying to go into flower, they'll stay in veg a little longer. That's part of the whole
Yeah.
crop steering method. Is certain different watering times, drybacks, and stuff like that can trigger your plants to want to flower easier or less in a situation. So by having better drybacks when you're trying to actually trigger into flower, your plant's gonna be like, oh, I need to do this. I'm starting to die. I need to like finish my life. Compared to if you're just flooding that while it's trying to trigger, it's just going to take it a little bit longer if it's not sensing as much of its stress factors.
I think that's a pro tip right there. And so when you're managing your canopy, how are you preventing floppage and that kind of stuff?
I do with trellis about every 6 inches to a foot.
Okay. What kind of are you using? There's like plastic trellises. There's like all kinds of
Um,
different types of different trellises.
we use plastic trellis, but we
Yeah.
reuse it, bleach it. We don't cut it. The problem I feel like the nylon and some of the fiber stuff, it gets in the buds, especially if it gets cut on accident and just makes a
Okay.
mess on stuff. And I'd rather not have that in my product.
Yeah.
But then we just reuse our trellis. It's like in our indoor, we're on like our 14th or 15th round using the same trellis. We just take it off, bleach it really good, let it dry, use it again.
That's brilliant. I mean, because that's a pretty wasteful process of how we all get down. So when you're doing these trellising, are you just kind of trellising around the plant as it's coming up? Or are you like having things in a row where you're kind of trellising and training the entire row?
Our indoor, we have PVC holding our trellis in the row, and then in our outdoor, we just have like 6 foot T posts pounded in the ground, and we just get that going and whatnot. Young, sooner the better. It's easier to let them grow into it than it is to try to get it down into them, especially big outdoor plants.
Oh yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
I find too, if you are in like maybe a situation where you have three or four next to each other, if you do that as each of them come up, then layer, they also kind of help support each other. So then you're just kind of supporting the outer edges and everything else kind of locks itself in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been using the T post thing. I started doing that last year and it worked well for me. But where I always get my ass handed to me is those damn moths and their caterpillars. They eat the shit out of my buds, and I just basically get wiped out every year. So this year I'm thinking about putting up mosquito netting around my like entire outdoor grow. Curious, do you get hit hard with caterpillars? And do you have any like pro tips for folks that do? Because I've tried to like spray my way through it, and it just doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, so a lot of the time the caterpillars are coming from being laid next to it. That's another thing I like about the plastic trellis is the caterpillars will 99% of the time lay their eggs on the trellis. And when it becomes caterpillar time, I'll go out there and I'll just wipe their eggs off with ISO soaked paper towel. And that cuts it down to where I get almost no caterpillar issues. With fabric nets, they will not lay their eggs on it. They don't think of it as a branch. So the way they're trying to do it, they're trying to lay it to where they can float onto the plant essentially. And when they hatch, they have like a silk strand that they float on. They're teeny little fuckers. So if you can catch the eggs at the right time, you could eliminate a lot of the problems. If you're using just stakes and some other things like that, you're not going to get the benefits of that plastic trellis. Like I've noticed using it year after year in Oregon and whatnot, that like the caterpillars just love to lay their eggs on it, and it really helps you cut that back.
No, I used the actual. I bought a framed out netted bug netted structure for my little situation, and it helped out immensely, but I always felt like I'm blocking a lot of sun. Kind of what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how thick the net is. Some people say their outdoor buds come out better with some shade cloth to it. It does get pricey using that net with how big and open where my outdoor is at. It would just cost me a lot of money to make that feasible. It can work. I've thought about doing it. Depending on how bad your spot is. The other thing is like look around where you're growing. What plants attract those kind of bugs? What is making that issue? Try to get rid of it. You know what I mean? If that is something that you're dealing with, there's usually something that draws it in. I'm on an old horse ranch that has a bunch of old apple trees, so that's where mine tend to come from. So we just got rid of the apple trees that were super close, and that really tends to help as well.
What about
Yeah.
companion planting and that kind of thing, or stuff that
Yeah,
attracts predators?
panhunting is great. You just got to once again look at where you're at and what grows good there, and make sure you're not planting invasive species and stuff like that, and figure out what draws bugs that you have in your area.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was just, getting turned on to mullein and how beneficial it is for your respiratory system. And I thought, oh, hell, fuck, I'm just going to blow my backyard up with a bunch of mullein. But then people pointed out to me that it is invasive. And if you let it get past into its second year, it'll start seeding out and spreading pollen and doing all kinds of harm. So I think that's something that people do need to be mindful for. It's a good point.
Last pro tip I'll ask you for before we let you go. Do you have any? So we talked about things to attract bugs. Do you have any predator or favorite predator bugs that you end up buying at home or at work? I guess because I end up spending hundreds of dollars each year on bugs, and I'm curious if you have any favorites.
Yeah, green lacewings are one of my favorites. They'll eat small caterpillars, they'll eat aphids, they'll eat a bunch of that kind of stuff. They repopulate. They're typically found in most environments, so that if you have the good stuff for them to repopulate, they will stay around a little bit. There's a couple of other ones. I think Swartskis is another one for mites. I forget the names of some of them. But we typically don't apply unless we see pressure. You know what I mean? Because I feel even if you're don't have anything, you're applying bugs. Your bugs are dying and pooping all over your plant, so you might get like particulate in your hash. I feel that's where some particulate comes from, and some people's indoors that should be clean is they constantly release bugs when they don't need to, and then they end up smoking bug shit and just bug carcasses just because they got to go somewhere.
Yeah, so from a competitor standpoint, you definitely don't want exoskeleton in your hash, right?
I mean, it's bound to happen, especially with outdoor. That's why outdoor tends to have more particulate in it between bug carcasses and just dust and debris. That's why indoor has the potential to be super clean. And if you aren't entering melt, you're just making rosin. You're not going to see any of that particulate anyways. But if you are trying to compete in melt, indoor tends to have the cleanest melt, and people are getting more particular in competitions for how clean the melt truly is from particulate.
And now one trend I'm seeing in hash makers is even if they were fully into the chemical route, they are starting to introduce organic methods into their systems with biostimulants or microbes to try to achieve some of this like synganic approach. But at the end of the day, most of the competitions that are winning are living soil results, correct?
Yes, I mean there's definitely some people who place decently with salt-based nutrients. Some strains, taste better than others when they're grown with it. Some strains are just more evident, and then I feel some people's stuff you just got to not be using that hydrocorpus acid that just makes everything taste like pool cleaner. So there are definitely some products to not use because people end up tasting it in the end product, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't placing or doing good with salts.
Well said. Well said. Because we did at the Duke Gross Cup, we did have a winner, took first place out of 60 plus entries, and it was GH3 part, and they just really knew what they were doing, and they had a really good cultivar that did well in that system, and they placed very well. I will say the last three winners of the Duke Gross Cup flower competition were living soil entries. And also this year, while we're kind of on this topic, the Dew Grows added a third day, and they're having a hash bash, and it's going to be a similar competition where you show up to the comp. They have ways for you to try every entry that's there. You're given 5 tokens, and then you vote on the entry that you like the best. So it's like a community vote, not a judge's vote.
Right. Like a people's choice in a sense.
Yeah,
Right.
people's choice. How do you feel? How do you kind of feel about that?
Well, people's choice, in my opinion, can kind of be skewed if they don't all try everything. How can it be the best fair judging?
Right.
How do I know that they just didn't hear from their buddy? Oh, go try number 6. That was so good. When all their buddy tried was number 6, and everyone entering a cup enters quality stuff. But if some word gets out like that, like oh, go try this, then everyone keeps saying it to everyone. That's gonna miss a skew the results. Not saying always, you know what I mean. Some people do people's choice proper, and sometimes that doesn't quite exactly happen, but I feel people's choice can be kind of skewed because of that.
Yeah. I think that's a fair criticism because frankly, you do see that a little bit at the Dude Grows Cup. In past years, I've seen it. Eventually, there will kind of settle around people definitely say like try 13 or try 11 or something like that. And so people end up trying it. And so I could see something like that happening, or at least you got to be careful. I guess, JR maybe can speak to, they probably try to stop that. I think you called it like politicking where people go out and like solicit like, hey,
yeah,
vote for
like
7.
the entry guys will come with like 30 of their buddies, right? They go to the jar, they instantly know what their jar is by looking at the flower. And then the next thing you know, bang, they're politicking. And so we frown on that heavily. And if we find out about it, it's not going to work out. You will, people get known for that kind of stuff. And so if you are coming to compete, don't bring your shenanigans.
JR will be there to enforce. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today, Mushmouth. Where can people go to like learn more about what you're doing? Maybe check out your product, things like that.
I'm just on Instagram as Mushmouth420. It's the only IG I have. But then I'm working with BA Botanicals. They also have a IG. And then they're a rec farm, so they're in dispensaries and whatnot. It's not my product quite yet, but we are going to have our first harvest in about 4 months, I think, maybe a little less.
Cool.
So be on the lookout for sure.
That's great. I mean, I love to go out and tour farms. I went out and seen your dad there. his and the giant operation that they're working with. So
That was a cool
any
video.
any opportunity to come out and visit a farm, I'm always down. We'd love to get you guys on the map.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with him. Because yeah, he's not too far from where you're at. Should only be like a 20-30 minute drive for you.
Nice, excellent.
That'd be cool. Yeah, JR's got a nice camera now, so he can get some cool videos. Well, this has been really fun. I really appreciate you hanging out with us this afternoon, Mushmouth. I
Yeah.
hope everyone follows you on Instagram, keeps up with you guys. And we'll definitely have to bring you back on sometime, learn some more about hash. But thank you so much for watching. JR, thanks for putting together today's episode. We've got more episodes on the way. For those in the CannaBuzz community that join these live streams, what day is our next episode or next interview?
I believe we're on a Monday next week.
Yeah, we kind of have dancing around days.
Yeah, because I can tell you that some people don't want to do this, during the weekend when they have their private time with their families. And other people like only have time to do it on the weekends. So we try to keep those Sundays and Mondays open. And we do have some fun people coming up. But yeah, so next week, hopefully, we'll have Tangled Roots on at Monday.
Yeah.
And we will get to talk about some genetic offerings for the Northern California and outdoor regions.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a great episode. That's Ryan from Tangled Roots at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday, the 24th, March 24th. For our CannaBuzz members, thanks to our sponsors, thanks to everyone in the CannaBuzz community, everyone who's watching on the live stream. Thanks everyone for watching on YouTube and all the podcast sphere. And as always, JR,
Growers love.
Peace, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.